Hi everyone, welcome to Javatechie. In this video, we'll explore how to take advantage of virtual threads in your Spring Boot application. Okay, alright. As you already know, virtual threads are a preview feature of Java 19 and excitingly, they were officially announced it as a standard feature in JDK 21. If you are not aware about what virtual threads are and how they function, I highly recommend checking out my dedicated video on virtual threads. If you will go to my YouTube channel, I already uploaded a dedicated video on virtual thread. You can have a look into this particular video. I will also share the link in video description for your reference. Okay, cool. So in this tutorial, we won't just explore the theoretical aspect, rather we will also conduct a practical benchmarking exercise to compare the response and throughput difference between platform and virtual thread. So without any further delay, let's jump into the practical example. Let's get started. So I have created a small example. So if you open the pom.xml, I am using Java 21 here. You can see here the Java version I am using 21 and the Spring Boot version I am using 3.2.1. Even you can try with 3.2.0. Now if you will scroll down, I have just defined the web dependency, Lombok and Spring Data JPA, and also I have just defined the MySQL connector. That's it. Now if you'll go to the project and if I will open my controller class, I have just defined a simple REST endpoint called get products with the URL / products, and if you'll go inside the method, I have just defined thread.sleep 1000 millisecond to just simulate the response time, and also I have just defined the log info statement to identify which thread is getting executed, whether it is platform thread or virtual thread, and at the end I am just doing the database call to fetch all the products. Okay, this is the simple endpoint. We'll test this endpoint with platform thread and virtual thread. Okay, that is what our use case, and I will also show you multiple benchmarking using Jmeter and Apache benchmarking. Okay, so first let me run the application, then we'll see by default it is taking which thread from this particular log. Okay, then we'll try to identify okay how we can enable the other thread mechanism. So let me start it. So it started on port 9191. Let me clear the console. Just go to the browser and simply I will trigger 9191 / products. Okay, so let me rename it. So the record total count is 1000. So it took some time to load all the records, but if you'll observe in the console, it is just executing thread info. This is what the log statement we are printing here, right? Thread info. And what is the current thread name? HTTP NIO 9191. This is the thread name, this is the thread number, and this is the priority, and this particular thread comes under main thread group. Okay, so it means when we start our embedded Tomcat server, it immediately pick the platform thread or OS thread to execute the logic or to initiate a request. So as we know, our embedded Tomcat or Tomcat server works on the thread per request model, right? For each request, it will create a new thread. Since we just trigger this particular request, it need a thread to execute, and it pick the operating system thread or platform thread to execute. Now it's our job to tell to the Tomcat, hey, don't use the platform thread, rather can you use the virtual thread? How we can tell to the Tomcat? Very simple. You just need to define a bean of Tomcat protocol handler customizer, and then you can tell them, okay, use the virtual thread task executor rather than OS or platform thread task executor. So let me just define the bean. Just define public Tomcat protocol handler customizer of type generic. Then I'll just define the lambda expression return protocol handler. Then I'll just define I mean, if you want, you can add a log statement to just print it. If not, simply tell that, hey, protocol handler dot set thread executor, set executor, and which type of executor you want to use, virtual thread for task executor. Okay, executors dot virtual thread, new virtual thread for task executor. That's it. Okay, just define this as a @bin. Simple, right? We are just telling to the Tomcat server, hey, can you please use virtual thread per task executor rather than pick the default one, which is the platform task executor. Now let's see, if we'll run the application, in the log we can see this particular method will execute with the virtual thread. That is how we can only verify from the log, right? Let me restart it. So it started. Let me clear the console and let me trigger the request again. Now if I'll go to the console, can you see here the thread info points to virtual thread. The number of thread count is 37 and runnable fork join pull. This is the thread name. So here we manually tell to the Tomcat server to use the virtual thread by just defining this particular bin. But if you are using latest Spring Boot version, you no need to define this particular bin. You can simply go to the application.properties or application.yml file and you can tell him, hey, can you please use the virtual thread, or can you enable the virtual thread for me? Spring dot threads virtual enable true. You can toggle the feature by this particular key. This is recently introduced in 3.2.0 version. Okay, here you can define whether you want to enable the virtual thread or not by just defining this particular key. So you no need to additionally configure any bin to telling that, okay, just use the virtual thread. Let me restart it. So it started. Let me clear this. Go to the browser, refresh the page, go to the console. Can you see here thread info virtual thread, and these are the name. So it is up to you whether you want to go with the bin configuration or just define the key to toggle the feature to enable the virtual thread or not. Okay, so this is simple, right? We just observe in our code we have the option to use platform thread and virtual thread both. Now let's do the performance testing to understand the throughput of virtual thread and platform thread. So for that I am going to use the Jmeter. If you don't know how to use Jmeter, I already uploaded a dedicated video on Jmeter. I will also share the link in video description for your reference. So for now, let me quickly open the Jmeter console. Then I will simply run sh jmeter.sh script to start the Jmeter server. Okay, just enter it. So this is the Jmeter GUI page. Just define your test plan. I will name it BT test plan. I will save it. Okay. Now inside this test plan, first you need to define the thread group. So just define the thread group and give the name of your thread group. Just specify BT, or it's fine. Thread group always will be unique. So what you can do next, number of thread. I'll define I want 1000 requests should be ramp up in every 3 seconds, and I want it to be run for specific time duration what I will specify. So I will execute this for 200 seconds, and every 3 seconds it will trigger 1000 requests. Okay, this is what the thread group configuration I have specified to just get the throughput difference for platform thread and virtual thread. Then simply just save it. Next we just need to create the HTTP request because we just want to call our slash products endpoint, right? So what is the host? Localhost, then port number 9191, and the URL is slash products, and the endpoint HTTP method type is get. Then just name it products get request, something like that, and save it. Now we'll hit this particular endpoint and it will execute with this particular thread group configuration. So to see the response, what I will do, I will just add the listener I want the response time graph. So I'll just rename it to get response time graph 1. Okay. And also I will add another listener to just view the result tree. So I will also name it view result tree hyphen 1, or I will simply rename it to get result tree 1. Okay, just save it. Now let me trigger this request. We need to wait for 3 seconds. After 3 seconds we'll see this response time graph. Okay, but currently I want to disable the virtual thread. First I will run it with the platform thread, then we'll see the graph, then we'll try to execute with the virtual thread and we'll compare both the graph. Okay, let me restart it. So we just disable the virtual thread. So it started. Let me clear this. Go to the Jmeter and let me trigger the request. Come to this get result tree. You can see the request count here, and also you can verify from your console whether really it is hitting your endpoint or not. You can see here each time it is firing the select query to fetch 1000 of record. And see the thread, we are using the platform thread. I mean, we are just trying to validate with the platform thread. So it comes under main, and this is the thread count, this is the name. You can see here, right? So let's wait for 3 seconds, sorry, 200 seconds. Once that is done, we'll see the result. So it executed. It took 3 minutes 25 seconds to complete. Now this is the result tree. If you will click on any, you can see this is the request and this is the response data. Now we want to validate the graph, right? Just go here and then click on display graph. Can you see here? So if you observe carefully in this graph, we can see that once the entire thread pool of Tomcat is utilized, the response time shoots from 7700 to 4900, and next then it has remains same because all the previous thread are got released. Okay, so this graph will not constant. On my machine, based on the number of core I have, I am getting this particular graph. But if you have more number of core, this graph might be change on your machine. Okay, so this is what the report we found from the platform thread. Now let's do one thing. Let's enable the virtual thread. Okay, let me start the server, and here I will not touch the existing one. I will create another listener to just capture the response for virtual thread. So what I'll do, I will just create listener, new response time graph. I'll just name it get response time graph hyphen 2. Save this. Then I will create another listener, view result tree. I'll name it get result tree 2. Just save it. So once our application restarted with the virtual thread, you can see here, right? We just enable the virtual thread. So to verify that, I will just do one thing. I'll just run it, and we are seeing the virtual thread. We are good. Clear this. Just go back to your Jmeter and let's run it. See the response time graph 1, whatever the response we captured, this is for platform thread. Now we'll capture the virtual thread specific graph in this particular get response time graph 2. So let me run it. Again we need to wait for 3 minutes, and this is what the result. It is keep going, keep executing. So you can see in the console, right? It is using virtual thread. So let's wait for 3 minutes and then we'll compare the graph. Okay, so we are done. Just go to the graph and let's refresh the graph. Can you see here? At some time it went to the peak 9600, then to just serve 1000 requests concurrently, it comes under 2400 and it shoots to 1600. Okay, again I repeat, this graph will vary if you have a good configuration on your system. Okay, so it should not be start from this 9600. It should be start somewhere in the 4000. I mean, whatever we are seeing in this graph, it start with the 7700. In virtual thread, the response should be better. It should be start around 56 and 4800. Okay, so if I'll run it again and again, I can see the different graph. It depends on your system performance. Fine. So to verify that, what I already have couple of previous captured image where you can clearly see that. See, this is what I have run for the platform thread. It shoots from 6600 to 4800, and then it remains same because other threads release their log. And then if you will go and check the other one, see, the previous one start with the 6600, right? In the virtual thread, it start with the 4400, and the graph is getting varied here, right? You can see here. Sometimes it shoots up, sometimes it's less, right? So you can give it a try with your own machine, and at least we can see the clarity here, right? So here it is in the peak position. 4900 is the constant, but in virtual thread we are seeing the result. It came down to the 2400, half of the previous rate, right? So what I understand, it clearly says that when I need to utilize the underlying CPU to the fullest, we should start using this virtual thread in our application, and suddenly you can see that the throughput of our application has increased. That is what, right? That is the main advantages of using this virtual thread. Spinning up a platform thread is the expensive resource, but if you use the virtual thread, this is lightweight, right? Within fraction of second you can spin up as many as you want the number for this particular virtual thread. Okay, now this is one part of the benchmarking we have done. Now let's see its concurrency response time. Okay, so let's say I just want to trigger 2000 requests with the concurrency level 400. Then what could be the output? Let's do that kind of benchmarking. This is we have done using the Jmeter. Okay, let's move into the next step, and we'll use Apache Bench to just do the further benchmarking. So let me clear this. First I will disable this particular virtual thread. I will get the result using the platform thread, then we'll get the result using virtual thread, then we'll compare both. So I'll just restart the application. Meanwhile, I'll go to the terminal. If you are using Linux operating system, then Apache Benchmark is already installed as a inbuilt software. But if it is not, if you are using Windows, then you need to explicitly install it on your machine. Okay, so I want to use Apache Benchmark, and I want to trigger number of requests. Let's say 1600, 1600 or 2000, it is up to you. And the number of concurrency I want to set 400. At a time I want 400 thread to be execute this number of requests. And what is the endpoint it will hit? Just copy this. So let's just check the server is started. Yeah, it started. Go to the terminal again, and I will just do this benchmarking for platform thread. Okay, I cannot. Okay, let me rename. If I can do rename the session or something like that. Let's say I will just rename it for platform thread. Okay, now let's run it. It will take few seconds to give the accurate result. So we got the response here. Percentage of the requests are within a certain time. 50% of request during this time, 66% during this time, and 100% till this time. Okay, and what is this? Processing, waiting, and total. You can explore more about all the response what you are getting. I just want to focus on time taken for test, 12.666 seconds. Okay, and if you observe here, this is the endpoint we have triggered, right? Slash product and localhost 9191, and the total response time it took 12.666 when you are using platform thread, right? Next, just let's run the virtual thread. I just want to enable it, and I just want to do the benchmarking using virtual thread. Then we'll compare the time taken for this particular test in platform and virtual. Just restart it. So it started. Let me clear this. Then I'll go to the terminal. This is the result of platform thread. I'll create another terminal. I'll just rename it. Okay. Now I'll copy the link, the command. Just run the same configuration for virtual thread. So if you'll compare here, 50% of the request it took this much time and processing waiting. Okay. So yeah, can you observe here? Time taken for the test 6.613 seconds. But in platform thread, what is the time it took? Almost double, right? So to create a platform thread and to destroy it or to allocate to some other resource, definitely it will take time to process any request, right? But since virtual threads are lightweight, it didn't take much time to execute your API. Okay, so you can see here, right? We are getting the, manually we are triggering the concurrency using Apache benchmark, and it is being executed here, and we are able to compare the time difference using this platform thread and virtual thread. Now you understand what is the throughput and response difference of this platform thread and virtual thread. So based on your use case, whether you want to utilize the complete CPU, you need to choose whether you will go for the platform thread or virtual thread. So you can consider this virtual thread as a alternative of your reactive programming. Okay. Now before I end up with the session, just wanted to ask you a small thing. Okay. Can I run 100 thread concurrently on my machine? Is this possible? If not, how many thread maximum I can run on my machine? Okay, so this is just a task for you. Try to answer it in a comment section, and do also let me know in a comment if you have any other doubts. That's all about this particular video, guys. Thanks for watching this video. Meet you soon with a new concept.